On her wedding night, the groom brought his lover and forced his wife to kneel and witness their sexual act. 1 hour later, the wife unleashed hell upon them both. The wedding night should have been the beginning of a happily ever after, but for Eleanor Montgomery, that day was hell itself. Her husband, Adrian Sterling, not only brought his mistress on the night of their wedding, but he also forced her to kneel and watch as they consummated their passion on the very bridal bed. However, an hour later, the man who believed he had the right to vengeance couldn't even begin to imagine that the prey he despised would transform into the most relentless of predators, inflicting upon him and his lover a pain worse than death. The countless lights of New York City embroidered the night with a dazzling splendor, like a luxurious artificial Milky Way. In the presidential suite of the Plaza Hotel, Manhattan's most prestigious establishment, resided another kind of beauty, the beginning of a lifetime of happiness. Eleanor Montgomery sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Her hands rested neatly on her pure silk wedding dress, a masterpiece of craftsmanship with intricate embroidery. The silver threads cascading from the hem were so elegant they seemed to have a life of their own. The room was permeated with the sweet scent of white roses and expensive scented candles. She felt a slight dizziness, perhaps from the glass of vintage Napa Valley Cabernet she had just finished. Today was her wedding day, the day she officially became the wife of Adrian Sterling, a man she loved with all her heart and mind, whom she had known for 2 years and loved for 1. Their love hadn't been a scorching fire but a steady, warm current. He was the young, brilliant, and chivalrous CEO of the Sterling Group. He was the perfect man in everyone's eyes, and most importantly, he had always treated her with respect and tenderness. She smiled gently, caressing the cold silk sheets with her long, slender fingers. From the ceremony at St. Patrick's Cathedral to this bridal suite, everything had been flawless. She was just waiting for Adrian to return after attending to the remaining guests. Time passed with an exasperating slowness. The candle wax hardened, the wine on the table grew warm, and the clock struck midnight. Her happy anticipation slowly faded, giving way to a nameless unease. She picked up her iPhone to call him, but stopped herself. He would be busy. She didn't want to bother him. Click. A sharp sound broke the silence, and the door opened. Eleanor stood up joyfully, a radiant smile illuminating her face. He was back. But her smile instantly froze at the scene before her. Adrian had walked in, but he wasn't alone. Clinging affectionately to his arm was Lucy Jenkins, Eleanor's best friend. Lucy wore a skin-tight black slip dress that revealed every curve of her body. Her usually sweet, innocent face was gone, replaced by a mocking smirk and an expression of open contempt and triumph directed at Eleanor. The Adrian that Eleanor knew had vanished. The man standing before her had a face as cold as ice. In his deep dark eyes, instead of familiar warmth, there was only a fierce hatred and unfathomable cruelty. He didn't even glance at the bridal gown she was wearing. Eleanor felt as if a massive boulder was crushing her chest, leaving her breathless. "What is going on, Adrian? You?" Her voice trembled, but before she could finish, Adrian spoke. His voice was frigid, every word a dagger to her heart. Surprised, Eleanor surprised. It was much more than that. Her world was collapsing. Adrian, Lucy. What does this mean? Lucy let out a loud laugh, provocatively, resting her head on Adrian's shoulder. "Oh, Ellie, how naive you are. Did you really think Adrian loved you?" Adrian gently pushed Lucy's hand away, not out of disgust, but to take a step closer to Eleanor. The distance between them shortened, but the alienation multiplied. "Love. Do you know how repulsive every second by your side has been for me? Every time I saw your smile, I remembered the desperate face of my father before he died." Eleanor's ears rang. Her father, what does my dad have to do with this? What are you talking about? I don't understand. You don't understand, Adrian sneered, his smile twisted with hatred. Let me explain it to you. 20 years ago, it was your father, Robert Montgomery, who set a trap for my dad, stripped him of his entire fortune and bankrupted Sterling Industries overnight. My father couldn't bear the humiliation. He took his own life by jumping off a building in the financial district. Now, tell me who should pay this blood debt. Eleanor took a step back, stunned. That's impossible. My father isn't that kind of person. There must be a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Adrian threw a manila folder onto the table. Here's plenty of proof. This marriage was a sham I planned from the very beginning. My only goal was to make you taste what it feels like to fall from heaven to hell. Exactly what you and your father did to my family. Every word echoed in her ears like thunder. 2 years of dating, a year of love. It was all a lie. The tenderness, the care, the sweet vows, it was all part of his cruel revenge plot. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back with all her might. She was Eleanor Montgomery, an expert in criminal psychology. She couldn't afford to break down in front of her enemy. "So what do you want?" Adrian flashed a vicious smile. "For you to pay the price." He pulled Lucy close and kissed her roughly. Then, looking directly at Eleanor, he ordered Neil. Eleanor froze. "On your wedding night? I want you to clearly watch your husband make love to another woman on your own bridal bed. This humiliation will be more painful than 1,000 stab wounds." She felt her blood run cold. She looked back and forth between Adrian and Lucy, who was smiling triumphantly. In that instant, all the love and hope inside her shattered. She didn't cry or scream. Her eyes were terrifyingly calm. Slowly, very slowly, she knelt on the plush wool carpet. Just as her knees sank into the rug, her heart plummeted into an abyss of despair. Adrian and Lucy fell onto the crimson bridal bed. The laughter, the sound of clothes tearing, and obscene moans echoed in the room that should have been pure. Eleanor remained, kneeling, her back straight. She didn't close her eyes. She stared directly at the blatant betrayal unfolding before her. The pain in her chest had already hardened into something cold and sharp. She was no longer a happy bride. She was a forced spectator of her own tragic play, and in her mind another plan, a much crueler one, was slowly taking shape. Time in the room seemed to stand still, heavy with humiliation. For any other woman, this would have been a living hell, an extreme mental torture. But Eleanor didn't break. She stayed kneeling motionless as a stone statue. Her clear eyes watched the two bodies intertwined on the bed, but it was as if the image no longer reached her brain. Her mind had completely detached from this painful reality. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a terrifying calm. Like a precisely programmed machine, her brain began analyzing the situation at lightning speed. Adrian hated her and her family. He had prepared this for a long time. Lucy, the friend she once trusted, was a viper. Everything was a lie. She had made a mistake. She had trusted people too much. Love had blinded her, but Adrian's biggest mistake was underestimating her. He only saw her as the fragile, naive, and vulnerable daughter of a wealthy family. He didn't know that beneath that soft exterior hid a brilliant criminal psychologist with unsurpassed strategic planning skills. While Adrian and Lucy reveled in the pleasure of their revenge, they completely failed to notice the movement of the woman kneeling on the floor. Eleanor's right hand, hanging by her side, twitched slightly. Her long, slender fingers slipped into the small silk clutch she had placed on the floor. Soundlessly, she pulled out her smartphone. The screen illuminated, casting a cold light on one side of her expressionless face. Her fingers glided across the screen, opening an encrypted messaging app. In her drafts, a message was already written. The recipient was set with a specially encrypted ID. The content was a single line. She didn't hesitate. There was no emotion on her face. Her finger decisively hit the send button. Message sent. Plan B initiated. Silently, she put the phone back into the clutch and continued her performance as a pitiful victim, enduring the humiliation with a straight back. 1 hour. She gave them exactly 1 hour to enjoy their fleeting victory. Time ticked heavily. Every second was torture, but Eleanor felt nothing anymore. She was on a countdown. 50 minutes. 40. 10. 5. The moment the minute hand on the wall clock passed the 12, signaling exactly 1 hour since Adrian entered the room, a sharp sound suddenly pierced the air. Ding, ding, ding. It wasn't one but dozens of notifications exploding simultaneously on Adrian and Lucy's phones resting on the nightstand. Their pleasure was abruptly interrupted. Adrian reached out with irritation and grabbed his phone. Lucy, curious, sat up, pulling the sheet over her bare chest. Damn it. What is it? Adrian frowned, unlocking the screen. His face drained of color, from surprise to horror, and from horror to a deathly pallor. Lucy, seeing his expression, hastily grabbed her own phone and let out a piercing scream. Her beautiful face contorted in sheer terror. On their screens, and likely on the screens of every major player in Wall Street and Hollywood at that exact moment, an avalanche of breaking news covered everything. Breaking: Sterling Group stocks plummet 30% in after-hours trading. Billions in market cap evaporate. Scandal. Leaked internal documents reveal massive corporate fraud and tax evasion within the Sterling Group. SEC investigating. Shocking video leaks of actress Lucy Jenkins doing cocaine at a private Hollywood Hills party. Her agency refuses to comment. Exclusive audio files reveal Lucy Jenkins secured lead roles in exchange for sexual favors with major producers. Every headline, every photo, every video dropped on Adrian and Lucy like an atomic bomb. This can't be. 1. How? How did these documents leak? Adrian muttered, scrolling with trembling hands. His career, the revenge plan he was so proud of, everything was crumbling before his eyes. Adrian, help me. Those videos are deepfakes. Someone set me up, Lucy screamed, clinging to his arm. But Adrian had no time for her. He looked up, his eyes filled with disbelief and an icy fury, staring at the woman who had been kneeling on the floor. She was already standing. Eleanor rose slowly, brushing invisible dust off her wedding dress. Her face remained serene, but in her eyes, as calm as an autumn lake, shone a cold, razor-sharp light. She looked directly into Adrian's terrified eyes and offered a faint smile, a smile devoid of warmth, filled only with mockery and contempt. Game over. The air in the room turned heavy. The silence following Eleanor's words was more terrifying than 1,000 insults. Adrian was rooted to the spot beside the bed. With his messy hair and his robust body bearing the marks of recent passion, he now looked pathetic. He stared at her, the wife he had brutally humiliated, and for the first time in his life he felt an unknown terror course through his veins. This woman hadn't cried, screamed, or begged. She just stood there peacefully, as if she had just finished watching a boring play whose ending she already knew. "What did you do?" Adrian's voice cracked. His arrogance and triumph were gone, leaving only the confusion and rage of a man who had entirely lost control. Lucy had completely broken down. She was screaming, wrapping herself tightly in the sheet, frantically scrolling through the exploding news on her phone, muttering nonsense. "That's not me. That's not me." Eleanor didn't spare them a second glance. As if they were air, their existence no longer held value to her. She turned and walked into the dressing room. She casually took off the wedding dress, treating it like a worthless rag, and dropped it to the floor like trash. Minutes later, she emerged wearing an elegant beige wide-leg pantsuit and a white silk blouse. Her long hair was tied in a sleek bun, revealing the noble line of her neck. Even without makeup, her sharp beauty radiated her gaze, remaining strangely cold. Rolling a small carry-on bag she had packed beforehand, she walked silently toward the door. "Stop," Adrian yelled, his anger at being outsmarted consuming his fear. "Where do you think you're going? Do you think you can just walk away after doing this?" Eleanor paused but didn't turn around. Her voice, clear and chilling, echoed in the room. "This is your prison, not mine. I've returned the principal with interest, Adrian. Between you and me, there is nothing left." She opened the door decisively and slammed it shut. The sound echoed like the final strike of a gavel ending this ridiculous fake marriage. She left behind Adrian's helpless roar and Lucy's hysterical crying. The hotel hallway outside the bridal suite turned hellscape remained quiet and luxurious. She walked soundlessly on the thick carpet. Her back was straight. Every step was firm. She wasn't running away. She was returning to herself. A pre-booked black car was waiting at the Fifth Avenue entrance. She got in and gave an address. The car glided into the night, blending into the bright stream of Manhattan traffic. 45 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a modern high-rise on Park Avenue. Eleanor took the elevator to the top floor. The doors to Ross & Associates law firm opened. David Ross was already waiting for her. He wore a perfectly tailored suit. His handsome face was calm, but he couldn't hide the concern and compassion in his eyes when he saw her. "You made it, Ellie." She nodded. Seeing her close friend, she felt as if the fortress she had forcefully erected was beginning to crack. David didn't ask too many questions. He quietly poured her a cup of hot chamomile tea. The warmth of the mug spread through her palms, calming her slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Yes, I am now," she replied, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. David sighed in relief, sat across from her, and placed a thick file on the table. "All the divorce papers are ready. According to the prenup, you won't lose a dime. On the contrary, Adrian, as the at-fault spouse, we'll be paying you a considerable sum." "Thank you, David." David looked deep into her eyes. "I didn't expect Plan B to be activated, let alone on your wedding night." "Ellie, what exactly happened?" Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. The nauseating scene in the suite flashed through her mind. She took a deep breath and opened them. The vulnerability was gone, leaving only fierce determination. He crossed the line. David clenched his fists. He knew what Plan B was. Half a year ago, when Eleanor agreed to marry Adrian, She asked David to deeply investigate the Sterling Group's financial standing. With the sharp intuition of a criminal psychologist, she sensed something was off in the way Adrian had approached her. It was too perfect, too dramatic. David's investigation revealed fatal flaws in their financial reports and highly suspicious offshore projects. At the time, Eleanor treated it merely as a defensive measure, an insurance policy to protect herself and her family if things went south. She had hoped she was wrong, that Adrian's love was genuine. But she was wrong, and tonight that defensive measure had become her sharpest weapon of counterattack. Everything was executed according to the plan. The evidence was dropped simultaneously across multiple financial news outlets and social media channels. Nobody will be able to trace it back to us. The Sterling Group, if it doesn't collapse entirely, is mortally wounded, David said confidently. Eleanor nodded, looking out the window at the illuminated Manhattan skyline. From this night forward, she was no longer Mrs. Sterling. She was Eleanor Montgomery, a woman who had just walked out of the ashes of betrayal, ready to burn anyone who tried to harm her. The presidential suite had gone from heaven to hell. Adrian paced the room like a wounded beast. He had smashed his own iPhone, but the notifications on Lucy's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from his secretary, his CFO board members, and major Wall Street investors rained down relentlessly. Every voicemail was filled with panic and blame. "Mr. Sterling, what the hell is happening? There's a massive sell-off. The banks are demanding an explanation on the leveraged loans, or they'll freeze our corporate accounts. Adrian, you better explain right now how this classified data got leaked. Do you know this will ruin the Sterling Group?" Adrian grabbed his head. A sense of powerlessness he had never experienced washed over him. He had dedicated his youth to building this empire, to accumulating the power to avenge his father. And in just 1 hour it was on the verge of total collapse, like a sandcastle in the tide. All because of that woman. Eleanor. That evil bitch, he growled, his eyes bloodshot. He never dreamed the docile rabbit he had despised hid such razor-sharp claws. He thought he had laid a perfect trap, only to realize he was the puppet. Beside him, Lucy's situation wasn't much better. The supporting actress career she had fought so dirty to build was going up in smoke. "Claire, please listen to me," she sobbed into the phone, talking to her Hollywood manager, Claire Foster. "Listen to you. Are you out of your mind, Lucy? Look at what you've done. The cocaine video. The casting couch scandal. Do you know every brand you represent is demanding breach of contract damages? The network just called to say you're fired from the show immediately. Your career is over. Don't call me again." The dial tone echoed. Lucy hurled the phone against the wall and screamed in despair. "No, this can't be happening. It's all Eleanor's fault. That bitch, I'm going to find her and kill her." She scrambled around like a madwoman, grabbing her clothes to run out the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Adrian grabbed her arm roughly, his glare threatening. "Do you have any idea how many paparazzi are down there right now? You want them to photograph you, looking like a lunatic. Then what do we do? Adrian, please help me. We're in the same boat." Lucy begged, treating him like her last lifeline, but Adrian, who could barely save himself, shoved her away. His eyes were filled with revulsion. The existence of this woman was starting to become a major nuisance. Meanwhile, in a completely different location, a highly secure penthouse loft in Tribeca, Eleanor calmly watched the storm she had unleashed. In front of her were 3 large monitors. One displayed the Sterling Group's free-falling stock chart. Another streamed live financial news updates. The third tracked the hateful comments and boycott hashtags against Lucy, trending on social media. She looked like a general in a command center overseeing the chaotic battlefield she had engineered. There was no joy or triumph on her face, only intense focus and cold rationality. This wasn't impulsive revenge born of rage. It was meticulously calculated punishment. Every document, every video was dropped at the precise millisecond to inflict maximum damage. She had turned her humiliating wedding night into a graveyard for the careers and honor of the 2 people who betrayed her. Her phone buzzed. "It was David. It's me. Everything is under control. The SEC and the Justice Department have announced preliminary inquiries into Sterling. Lucy is blacklisted. She'll never work in Hollywood again. Ellie, where are you right now? Do you want me to come over?" His voice was laced with worry. "I'm fine. I just need some time alone. Don't tell anyone where I am for now. Not even my parents. I don't want them to worry. All right, call me the second you need anything." Eleanor hung up and returned her gaze to the red numbers dancing on the stock ticker. The storm had just begun, and the person who would decide when it ended was her. On the 50th floor of the Sterling Group, headquarters in Midtown, the spacious CEO's office was swallowed by darkness and chaos. The blinds were tightly shut. Broken glass from a shattered vase and scattered papers littered the floor. The heavy stench of bourbon and cigarette smoke created a suffocating atmosphere of despair. Adrian was slumped in his expensive leather chair, his head in his hands. His usually impeccable hair was a mess. He had been there for a full day and night, subsisting entirely on alcohol and tobacco. On his computer screen, the red numbers and sensational headlines kept updating. The company was facing the worst crisis in its history. Shareholders were panicking, partners were backing out, employees were terrified. 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears were evaporating. But far more painful than his crumbling career was the realization that he had been completely outplayed by the woman he despised. He closed his eyes. The painful memories surfaced vivid as yesterday. He was only 8 years old then. His father, Arthur Sterling, was a capable, proud man. Arthur was his whole world. He used to carry Adrian on his shoulders around their Greenwich estate, speaking warmly of his grand dreams. Then, tragedy struck. A mob of angry creditors swarmed their home. He hid behind a door trembling and saw his father, the imposing titan, on his knees begging. Sterling Industries had gone bankrupt overnight. His father's closest partner, Robert Montgomery, of the Montgomery Corporation, had suddenly pulled funding from a crucial project and leaked damaging files that backed Sterling into a corner. That night his father stood on the roof of the company building in Fiddy. The wind howled. His father looked at him with eyes full of despair and resentment, and then he jumped. The falling silhouette left a wound in Adrian's soul that never healed. His mother, overwhelmed by grief, fell ill and died shortly after. From a wealthy heir he became an orphan passed between relatives. The hatred took root. He swore he would pay the Montgomery family back 100-fold. He worked like a maniac. As he was building his future, Lucy Jenkins appeared. She was Eleanor's college roommate, pure innocent looking. She was always by his side, comforting him, and without him noticing, she stoked the flames of his hatred. Once, she showed him a photo of Eleanor's luxurious trip to Europe. "Ellie looks so happy," Lucy sighed. "Her dad gave her that trip for getting good grades. I heard it cost enough to feed a normal family for years. If only Mr. Sterling hadn't had his accident." "You'd be living like that too." Another time, she accidentally left a folder on his desk. Inside was a copy of an old contract between Sterling Industries and the Montgomery Corporation, with unfavorable clauses astutely circled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave that. They're my dad's old papers. He used to work for your father. I just wanted to understand what happened so I could comfort you better." Slowly, Lucy added fuel to his fire, turning it into an inferno that consumed his reason. He became convinced Robert Montgomery was the murderer, and that his daughter Eleanor enjoyed her wealth on the back of his family's suffering. So he approached her. With his gentlemanly charm, his success, and fake tenderness, he wove the perfect net of love. He wanted her to fall deeply in love, to trust him unconditionally, so he could deliver the fatal blow on their wedding night and drag her to hell. But he had been wrong. Adrian opened his bloodshot eyes. He calculated everything, but he hadn't foreseen Eleanor's counterattack. He made her his enemy only to discover she was far more terrifying and unpredictable than he could ever imagine. After a day and night of drunken chaos, Adrian finally stood up. He couldn't just collapse. The Sterling Group's fall was temporary. There was still a chance to recover. But first, he had to find that woman, face her, and figure out how the hell she pulled this off. He splashed cold water on his face, shaved, changed into a fresh suit, and tried to reconstruct the arrogant CEO. Leaving the building, he drove his black Maserati through Manhattan like a madman. He knew Eleanor wouldn't be at her parents' Upper East Side townhouse. She wouldn't want to drag them into it. She wouldn't go to David Ross openly either. She was too smart. But Adrian wasn't stupid. After a year together, he knew her habits. He mobilized his contacts, tracked credit card pings, and finally located a luxury Tribeca loft rented under an alias, but paid for from an offshore account linked to David Ross. He parked outside the luxury building. Using his identity and a few well-placed bribes, he bypassed security. He stood before the penthouse door and instead of knocking, used a master keycard he'd obtained through his fixer. The door clicked open. Inside, Eleanor sat on a plush sofa, reviewing documents on an iPad. She wore comfortable loungewear, her hair falling naturally over her shoulders. Hearing the door, she slowly looked up. There wasn't an ounce of surprise in her eyes, as if she knew he was coming. Her calm reignited the rage Adrian had forced down. He marched in, slammed the door, and approached her, fists clenched. "Eleanor, how could you be so vicious?" Eleanor placed the tablet on the coffee table and met his gaze. Her eyes were clear, no hatred, no fear, just cold distance. "Vicious, Adrian. Compared to what you did to me that night, this is nothing." Adrian gritted his teeth. "That was payment for what your father did to my family." "Oh, really?" She offered a mocking smile. "And what did you base my father's guilt on?" "A few dubious papers handed to you by Lucy Adrian. For the CEO of a massive conglomerate to be so blinded by emotion and hatred that you can't even distinguish the truth. You are truly pathetic." "How dare you?" Adrian's anger peaked. But before he could move, Eleanor stood up, facing him down. They were inches apart. "Let me make this clear. If the Sterling Group collapsed today, it's not my fault. It's because of the gaping holes in your own management, your greed, and the dirty methods you used to build your so-called empire. Tax evasion, cooking the books, cutting corners on materials. It's all true, isn't it? I just helped bring the facts to light. You should be thanking me." Every word shredded his pride. Yes, it was true. He had used ruthless, illegal methods to grow the group fast enough to gain the power for his revenge. He had dug his own grave. Eleanor merely pushed him in. He looked deep into her eyes, searching for a trace of vulnerability, a lingering spark of love. He found nothing but absolute certainty. Eleanor stepped back, maintaining a safe distance. "The humiliation you handed me that night, I've returned 100-fold to your career. Let's consider us even." She walked to the door and pulled it open. "Please leave. From now on, we have absolutely no relationship. My lawyer will send the divorce papers soon." Adrian stood frozen. He had come to demand answers, but ended up evicted like a total loser. As he crossed the threshold, he didn't dare look back at her. The door clicked shut, expelling him from her world once again. Days passed. New York's financial sector was still reeling from the Sterling Group earthquake. Adrian disappeared from the public eye, dedicating himself entirely to damage control. In her Tribeca loft, Eleanor gradually found her rhythm. She no longer obsessed over the news. The initial rage and pain had settled, replaced by the clinical analysis of a criminal psychologist. She sat on the rug. In front of her was a large whiteboard mapped with a complex web connecting the Sterling and Montgomery families. Timelines, events, and individuals were linked with red markers. Adrian's revenge was cruel, but it had an internal logic. He truly believed her father ruined his. But Eleanor knew Robert Montgomery better than anyone. Her father was a man of strict principles. He would never use underhanded tactics to drive a man to suicide. There had to be more to it. The doorbell rang. Glancing at the security feed, she saw David. She let him in. He carried takeout containers and a thick manila envelope. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. "You haven't eaten, have you?" He set the food down. "I dug back into the Sterling Industries bankruptcy from 20 years ago." Eleanor pushed the food aside and grabbed the file. "Did you find something new?" David sat across from her. "There's a massive, glaring issue. The prime evidence Adrian had, the proof that made him think your father set the trap, was an audio recording and a chain of emails. I had a digital forensics expert analyze the original files Adrian's team leaked to the press." He opened to a page displaying complex audio waveforms. The audio is highly sophisticated, but there are artifacts of splicing. Sentences were removed, entirely changing the context. And the emails. The digital timestamps are corrupted. It looks like they were generated long after the fact and backdated. Eleanor held her breath. In other words, the evidence was forged. Not entirely fabricated, David clarified. It's like a forged painting. They didn't paint a new canvas. They took a real conversation and subtly altered details to shift the meaning. It's incredibly hard to detect. A chill ran down her spine. If the evidence was altered, it meant a third party orchestrated this from the shadows. Someone who wanted the Sterlings to fall, but also wanted to frame the Montgomerys, ensuring mutually assured destruction. Exactly, David nodded, admiring her quick deduction. The question is, who? Eleanor stood up, walked to the whiteboard, and circled a name. Adrian was blinded by hate. He wouldn't have been calm enough to forge something this sophisticated. He was just a pawn. My father and his father were the directly involved parties. So the prime suspect is someone who had access to Sterling Industries' internal data back then, and who later managed to get close to Adrian to plant the seed. Her gaze sharpened like a blade. It has to be someone we both know. Someone who played the innocent victim, but twisted the knife in the dark. She wrote a name on the board. David followed her finger and frowned. Lucy Jenkins. Eleanor lowered the marker, her voice freezing over. I underestimated her. I didn't know a woman's envy combined with boundless ambition could create a demon this terrifying. The play wasn't over. A thicker fog, hiding an even darker conspiracy, was slowly lifting. Eleanor knew she had to tear that fog apart. Lucy Jenkins was living her worst nightmare. After that disastrous night, Adrian unceremoniously abandoned her. Forced into hiding, she rented a dingy apartment in Queens, where no one would recognize her. Her bank accounts were frozen pending investigations. She went from an up-and-coming starlet to an outcast. She lived in paranoia, afraid the FBI would knock down her door at any second. She hated Eleanor to her core, but she was also deathly afraid of her. While doom-scrolling on a burner account, a blind item on a Hollywood gossip blog caught her eye. Rumor has it that E.V. Scamp is sitting on evidence that could put disgraced actress L.J. behind bars for federal financial crimes. Not just couch-casting, folks, we're talking real prison time. Lucy's heart stopped. Prison. Scandals ruined careers, but federal crimes ended lives. No, it can't be. I covered everything perfectly. How could I leave a trail? Is Eleanor just bluffing to scare me? But she couldn't risk it. Eleanor's terrifying calmness that night was burned into her brain. Paralyzed by fear, Lucy decided she had to find out what Eleanor knew. Using a payphone, she dialed Eleanor's old number, praying it was still active. Hello. The clear, serene voice made Lucy flinch. It's me. Lucy. Silence. Then, a soft, chilling laugh. Well, I thought you'd be too busy dodging subpoenas. Glad you have time to call Lucy. You fucking bitch, after ruining my life. What more do you want? Lucy's voice cracked, fear morphing into defensive rage. What do I want? Eleanor said slowly. I just want justice for the innocent. Do you understand what I mean, Lucy? Lucy's stomach dropped. She knows. You say you have proof. Stop bluffing, Lucy screamed, her voice trembling. What I have isn't the point. The point is what you did. You can't hide the sun with one finger, Lucy. Hearing Eleanor's ironclad certainty, Lucy changed tactics, bursting into sobs. Ellie, we were best friends. Remember, I messed up. I'm sorry. Please forgive me just this once. I'll give you whatever money you want. Please don't release that evidence. Lucy, some things money can't fix. Get ready. Eleanor hung up abruptly. Lucy collapsed onto the floor of the phone booth, sheer terror washing over her. The trap was set, and the prey had taken the bait perfectly. Lucy's panic was an indirect admission that she was hiding a massive secret. Back in the loft, Eleanor placed her phone down. The call was recorded. The pieces of the puzzle were finally forming a complete picture. 2 days later, Lucy received a text from an unknown number. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. The Oak Room. Private booth. Come alone. Lucy was terrified, but this was her only chance to figure out Eleanor's final card. The next day, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, large sunglasses, and a surgical mask, Lucy took a cab to the upscale restaurant. A waiter guided her to a private, soundproofed room at the back. Eleanor was already there, calmly pouring tea from a delicate porcelain pot. Wearing an elegant emerald green dress, her hair pulled back softly, she looked like a Park Avenue socialite, enjoying a quiet afternoon entirely unbothered. Her composure only spiked Lucy's anxiety. Sit, Eleanor commanded without looking up. Lucy sat her hands, clutching her purse under the table. Why did you call me here, Eleanor? Slid a cup of Earl Grey toward her. We were best friends, weren't we? What's so strange about inviting you for tea? Friends, Lucy sneered. You dare say that word. You ruined my life. Eleanor finally looked up. And my life. My marriage. My honor. Who ruined that, Lucy? Lucy swallowed hard, shifting to a softer, whiny tone. Ellie, that was Adrian's doing. I'm a victim too. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him, he'd blacklist me from every studio. I had no choice. No choice. Eleanor took a graceful sip of her tea. So the lies you told Adrian to turn him against my family, the manipulated documents you accidentally showed him, were those also because you had no choice? Lucy went sheet white. What garbage are you talking about? I don't know anything. Eleanor set her cup down. The clink of china against the wood was sharp. Lucy, I'm a psychologist. Your clumsy lies can't fool me. You were greedy, envious. You coveted my background. Everything I had. So you used Adrian's grief to push him down the path of revenge, hoping our families would destroy each other so you could reap the benefits. A perfect plan, really, but you underestimated me and overestimated Adrian's intelligence. You're trying to provoke me. Do you have proof? Proof. Eleanor smirked. I don't need it. But I know you didn't forge those emails and audio files. You aren't smart enough. The culprit had to be someone deep inside Sterling Industries, someone who had access to those confidential files. For example, the chief accountant, who suddenly resigned right before the bankruptcy. Eleanor spoke casually, never taking her eyes off Lucy's face. She had thrown out a false hypothesis, a verbal trap to gauge the reaction. Terrified, her deepest secret was being unearthed. Lucy instinctively blurted out, "What chief accountant? What does that old fool know?" The land transfer contracts had nothing to do with him. The moment the words left her mouth, Lucy realized her fatal error. She slapped her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Land transfer contracts? Eleanor tilted her head, repeating the phrase. A triumphant smile touched her lips. Nowhere in the old case files were land transfer contracts ever mentioned. Lucy, thank you for the information. Eleanor stood up, not sparing another glance at the woman frozen in her chair. She threw a $100 bill on the table. Tea is on me. Consider it a final farewell to our dead friendship. Left alone, Lucy realized she had dug her own grave, sinking into a paralyzing despair. In the Sterling Group CEO's office, Adrian was buried in damage control, trying to stabilize the hemorrhaging stock. But his mind was tortured by Eleanor's parting words, "You are truly pathetic." Once his initial rage faded, the irrationality of Lucy's behavior struck him. When the scandal broke, she didn't stand by him. She demanded compensation for her career. Her love was entirely transactional, and those old papers of her dad's. How did a college drama major stumble upon 20-year-old sensitive corporate documents? Adrian called his most trusted cybersecurity chief. I want you to run a deep forensic sweep on the emails and audio files Lucy Jenkins gave me regarding the Montgomery Sterling case. Check the metadata. Any trace of tampering. Then he hired the city's top private investigator. Dig up everything on Victor Jenkins, Lucy's father. His role at Sterling Industries, his exit, his offshore accounts. I want a report in 24 hours. Adrian leaned back, a profound exhaustion washing over him. He was terrified. Terrified that the hatred driving his entire adult life was built on a lie, and that he had destroyed an innocent woman. A day later, the calls came. Mr. Sterling, forensics are back. The email timestamps are completely forged. They were created 5 years ago, backdated to 20. The audio is heavily spliced. It's a professional deepfake job. Before Adrian could even process it, the PI called. Mr. Sterling. Victor Jenkins wasn't just an employee. He was the deputy CFO of Sterling Industries. And he didn't resign. Your father, Arthur Sterling, fired him after discovering Victor was embezzling massive corporate funds. The firing happened exactly 1 week before Sterling Industries went bankrupt. Boom. A nuclear bomb detonated in Adrian's mind. Victor Jenkins. Embezzlement. Fired. The scattered puzzle pieces violently snapped together. Now he understood. Why the evidence was so sophisticated. Why Lucy knew the internal drama. Why she pushed him toward revenge. The true enemy of the Sterling family wasn't Robert Montgomery. It was the Jenkins family. He had been played. He was the murder weapon they used to stab an innocent man. Adrian collapsed into his chair, shaking violently, his face devoid of color. Not only was he wrong, he was a cruel, stupid sinner. A tsunami of guilt and remorse swallowed him whole. At Ross and Associates, the lights were on at 1 a.m. David stared intensely at his monitors, surrounded by decades-old yellowed real estate files. Eleanor's Clue land transfer contracts had opened an entirely new avenue. David had scoured Manhattan and New York State property records from 20 years ago. He found them. A series of highly suspicious land transfers executed right before Sterling's bankruptcy. Prime industrial real estate, owned by Sterling, was sold for pennies to freshly incorporated shell companies. Those shell companies flipped the land for market value, days later laundering the massive profits offshore. The signatory on these contracts wasn't Arthur Sterling or Robert Montgomery. It was the deputy CFO Victor Jenkins. David rubbed his tired eyes and dialed Eleanor. I got it. Eleanor listened silently as David laid it out. Victor Jenkins embezzled the funds. sold off the assets, and when Arthur Sterling caught him and prepared to press charges, Victor struck first. He hired hackers to forge evidence framing your father. His goal was to start a war between the two tycoons. While Sterling and Montgomery fought to the death, no one noticed a fired deputy CFO slipping away with millions. So Eleanor said, her voice eerily calm, "Adrian's father died unjustly, and my father was framed. Both our families were victims of his play." "Yes, and Lucy was in on it from the beginning," David confirmed. Eleanor scoffed. "She's the heir to her father's masterpiece. Her father just wanted to run with the money, but Lucy's ambition was much larger. She wanted the spotlight and the wealth. That's why she approached a grieving orphan like Adrian. She played the angel while whispering poison in his ear. Her plan was for Adrian to destroy my family, marry her, and hand her the Sterling Empire. Fishing in troubled waters," David muttered, chilled by the sociopathy. "What do you want to do? Hand this to Adrian?" No, Eleanor's voice was absolute. "If I give it to him, he'll just think he owes me a favor. A truth handed to you isn't as painful as a truth dug up with your own hands. I want him to taste the despair of realizing his life's gospel was a fraud. Let him witness his own stupidity." Adrian was drowning in self-loathing. He locked himself in his Greenwich mansion, cutting off all contact. He wanted to crawl to Eleanor and beg for forgiveness, but he lacked the courage. Then, he received an anonymous text on his burner phone. "If you want the full truth about your father's death, go to the Hideaway Tavern in Brooklyn tonight at 7 p.m. Back booth. Just observe. Do not act." Simultaneously, in her dingy Queens apartment, Lucy received a text. "The FBI obtained the original land transfer contracts. They are tracing the shell companies." Panic consumed Lucy. She immediately called her father, Victor Jenkins. "Dad, we have a massive problem. We need to meet. 7 p.m. The Hideaway in Brooklyn." Adrian arrived early, hiding in a secluded booth obscured by heavy wooden partitions. Shortly after, Lucy and Victor hurried in. Victor was a middle-aged man with a seemingly gentle face, but his eyes were shrewd. "Dad, what do we do? The FBI has the contracts," Lucy hissed. Victor frowned, maintaining his cool. "Why are you panicking? I wiped that trail 20 years ago. No one can trace it to us." "But what if it's Eleanor? She's not normal." Victor scoffed. "Like father, like daughter. Both idiots. 20 years ago I used a few tricks, and Arthur Sterling and Robert Montgomery slaughtered each other. And Sterling's kid is even dumber. All it took was you shedding a few tears, and he became our sharpest knife to eliminate our enemies." Behind the partition, Adrian felt a sledgehammer slam into his chest. His blood froze. "But Adrian doesn't trust us anymore," Lucy whined. "Our plan to steal the Sterling fortune is ruined." Victor patted her hand. "So what if we missed the big fish? With the millions I took back, then we can live like royalty in the Caymans. Once this blows over, we bounce." Poor Adrian. Living his whole life fueled by hate, only to realize he was a puppet for the people who actually killed his dad. "Isn't it hilarious?" the father and daughter chuckled. To Adrian, it was the sound of hell. His world completely collapsed. The truth he just heard was worse than death. He had dedicated his life to avenging his father, only to act as the executioner for his father's murderers. He had tortured the most innocent woman he should have protected. Tears streamed down his face. He wasn't just stupid. He was a monster. Adrian stumbled out of the tavern, wandering into the pouring rain. He drove aimlessly through the streets of New York, the windshield wipers struggling against the deluge. Every word Victor said shredded his soul. Sterling's kid is even dumber. A puppet. He slammed on the brakes. He had to find Eleanor. He had to tell her the truth, and even though he knew he didn't deserve it, beg for her forgiveness. He drove to her Tribeca building and stood in the torrential rain, looking up at the penthouse window. He dialed her number with shaking hands. "What do you want?" Her voice was cold. "I'm downstairs." Adrian choked out the rain, hiding his tears. "I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about. Ellie, please. Just this once. I'm begging you." The line went dead. Adrian stood there, paralyzed in the freezing rain. He didn't leave. He stood like a penitent statue for 2 hours. Finally, the lobby doors opened. Eleanor stepped out, holding an umbrella, wearing a long trench coat. She didn't approach him. She stayed under the awning, watching his pathetic state with dead eyes. She didn't invite him in. "What do you want? Speak." "I don't have time." Adrian stumbled toward her. He looked into her clear eyes, the eyes he once loved, the eyes he had turned to ice. And then the arrogant titan of Wall Street fell to his knees on the wet Manhattan asphalt. "Ellie, I was wrong," he sobbed, looking up at her. "It's all my fault. I was a stupid, blind piece of trash. I trusted the wrong people. I'm so sorry. Can you please forgive me?" He was desperate, willing to do anything for a sliver of her mercy. Eleanor looked down at him. The rain hammered against her umbrella. She made no move to help him up. "Forgiveness," she said softly, her voice sharper than broken glass. "Adrian, what good is my forgiveness? Will it bring your father back to life? Will it erase 20 years of slander against my father?" He choked, speechless. "My forgiveness can't fix what is already dead. The wound you left me that night will never heal." She turned around and walked back into the lobby. The heavy glass door clicked shut, leaving Adrian kneeling alone in the cold abyss of his endless remorse. 2 days later, David Ross called Adrian. "Eleanor wants to see you. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., my office." Adrian arrived at the Park Avenue firm looking like a ghost of his former self. Eleanor sat beside David. She slid an iPad toward Adrian. On the screen was the complete dossier of the Jenkins crimes. "I assume you know the truth," she said, her tone purely transactional. "I know," Adrian croaked. "Good. Then, let's not waste time. I called you here to propose a deal. The Jenkins family didn't just kill your father. They framed mine. Our goal is the same. Make them pay. We have evidence, but to ensure a federal conviction without loopholes, we need someone to get close to them and get a recorded confession." She stared into his soul. "And there is no one better suited for that role than the man Lucy Jenkins once loved and trusted." The word trusted twisted the knife in his gut. "What do I have to do?" Eleanor placed a tiny Bluetooth earpiece and a button camera on the table. "You will continue your performance. Make Lucy believe you're still in her grasp, still burning with hate for the Montgomery family. Pretend you're planning to flee the country with her. Draw out where they hid the embezzled funds and make them confess on tape." It was a dangerous, humiliating plan. He had to play the fool for the woman he loathed most. But it was his only path to penance. "I'll do it," he said without hesitation. Eleanor nodded. "Remember one thing. In this operation, I call the shots. You follow my instructions to the letter. No improvisation. Can you do that? I can. Then let's begin. Call Lucy. Tell her you found a way out for both of you." Thus began an uneasy alliance. In the secure loft, Eleanor and David monitored the audio and video feeds. Adrian stood by the window, the wire attached. "It's time." Eleanor's voice echoed in his ear. "Sound desperate. Make her think she's your only lifeline." Adrian dialed. Lucy picked up, sounding cautious. "It's me, Adrian," he said, forcing his voice to tremble. "Everything went to hell. The SEC is breathing down my neck. I'm finished. What's the point of calling me? I'm ruined too. We still have a chance," Adrian pleaded. "I have offshore funds nobody knows about. If I liquidate, we can run. Get out of the country, start over. Lucy, you're the only one I can trust. We're both victims of that bitch Eleanor." In the loft, Eleanor smirked. "Good execution." Lucy hesitated. The bait was too tempting. "Why should I believe you?" Adrian let out a bitter laugh. "Look at me. My company is dead. My reputation is garbage. And the wife I used for revenge stabbed me in the back. What else do I have to lose?" Lucy finally bit. "Fine. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The artisanal coffee shop near Washington Square Park. Come alone." The next morning, Adrian sat in a private back room of the cafe. Lucy arrived heavily disguised. Following Eleanor's instructions through his earpiece, Adrian pitched the escape to Switzerland, claiming it would cost $1 million to secure fake passports and a jet. He asked her to chip in. Lucy, greedy as ever, balked, but didn't outright refuse. She demanded a meeting with her father to approve the deal. 3 days later, the trap was sprung at an exclusive, secluded tea house in Manhattan. Adrian arrived, fully wired. Victor and Lucy were waiting. "I heard your bold plan," Victor said smoothly, pouring tea. "But how do I know this isn't a trap by you and Robert Montgomery's daughter?" "Don't insult me." Adrian slammed his cup down, acting enraged. "That woman ruined my life. I hate her more than I ever hated her father. I have $100 million in a Swiss account. Help us get out, and I'll give you half. $100 million. Victor's eyes gleamed with raw greed. The bait was swallowed whole. How can I trust you won't back out? Victor pressed. Adrian pulled out a power of attorney document. I'll sign this, leaving the beneficiary blank. The second we land in Geneva, it's yours. Intoxicated by the massive payday and his own perceived brilliance, Victor's ego took over. 20 years ago your father was smart but inflexible. Robert Montgomery trusted people too much. With a few tricks and doctored files, I made those two titans tear each other apart, and I walked away rich. That's life. If you aren't ruthless, you don't win. The confession was crystal clear. Adrian left the tea house, dripping in cold sweat. Back at the loft, Eleanor and David listened to the recording. Their faces were ice. The mission was complete. Adrian looked at Eleanor, his eyes full of unspoken apologies, but she merely gave a curt nod. The play was entering its final act. 3 days later, the lobby of the Sterling Group headquarters was brilliantly lit for a surprise gala. Wall Street executives remaining partners, and hundreds of journalists packed the room. No one understood why Adrian would throw a massive party while facing federal indictments. Adrian stepped onto the stage looking like a broken king. Beside him stood Lucy, wearing a dazzling red gown and diamonds radiating arrogant triumph. Victor watched from the shadows, smirking. The sterling fortune is finally ours. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian spoke into the microphone, his voice solemn. Recently, I have faced the abyss. My partners abandoned me and the wife I loved stabbed me in the back. In my darkest hour, only one person stood by me. He reached for Lucy's hand. Miss Lucy Jenkins. Therefore, I am announcing that I will be transferring my controlling shares of the Sterling Group to her. She is the new owner. The room gasped. It was madness. Lucy stepped up to the mic, glowing with victory, ready to deliver a speech that would humiliate Eleanor. But before she could speak, click. The grand ballroom went pitch black. Panic ensued. Seconds later, a single spotlight illuminated the massive LED screen behind the stage. The image of the private tea house appeared. The ballroom doors swung open. Eleanor and David walked in. Eleanor wore a simple, elegant black dress, looking like the harbinger of doom. On the screen, Victor's recorded voice boomed through the speakers. With a few tricks and doctored files, I made those two titans tear each other apart, and I walked away rich. The audio continued, accompanied by undeniable proof. The forged emails, the offshore accounts, the land transfer deeds with Victor's signature. Turn it off. It's a deep fake. Victor screamed, trying to run, but security guards blocked his path. She set me up, Lucy shrieked hysterically. At that moment, a team of FBI agents in windbreakers swarmed the stage. Victor Jenkins, Lucy Jenkins, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Hands behind your back. The handcuffs clicked. The 20-year farce was over. Amidst the chaos, Eleanor turned to leave. She paused. Across the stage, Adrian stood quietly watching her. The spotlight hit him, casting a long, lonely shadow. Their eyes met. No words were spoken, but in that gaze lay all the pain, regret, and a silent, tragic farewell. The trial was the media circus of the decade in the Southern District of New York. Eleanor watched from her loft. Victor Jenkins was sentenced to life in federal prison without. Wall Street issued public apologies. Montgomery Corporation stocks skyrocketed. It's over, David said softly, placing a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. I know, she whispered, feeling an immense hollow exhaustion. Meanwhile, Adrian was liquidating his life. He sold his Hamptons house, his cars, his watches. He stepped down entirely from Sterling Group. He took his massive Swiss fortune and divided it. Half went to founding the Sterling Montgomery Foundation, providing legal aid for victims of corporate fraud. The other half he presented as a check to Robert Montgomery in the Montgomery family's Upper East Side study. Mr. Montgomery, I know this doesn't erase the pain I caused. Please accept this as penance, Adrian bowed deeply. Robert Montgomery sighed. Adrian, get up. You were a victim of a cruel lie too. I will donate this to your foundation. Live a good life. That is how you honor your father. Adrian wept outside the Montgomery home. He visited his father's grave in upstate New York, crying until he had nothing left. He had unburdened his soul, but he knew his path of atonement would be a solitary one. A week later, Adrian texted Eleanor to meet him at the Loeb Boathouse in Central Park. She arrived, looking serene but distant. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Adrian smiled sadly, handing her a folder. The divorce papers. Signed. Keep everything. I'm leaving New York tomorrow. I'm moving to a quiet town in the Midwest to start over. Eleanor looked at the papers. Thank you, Ellie, for showing me the truth when you could have just destroyed me. I'm sorry for everything. He bowed deeply, turned around and disappeared into the autumn crowds of Central Park. A single tear fell from Eleanor's eye, blurring his signature. It was finally over. A year later, a new psychological wellness center opened on a quiet tree-lined street in Greenwich Village. It was called Rebirth. Eleanor was the founder. She used her trauma to help other women who had been betrayed and broken, guiding them to rise from their ashes. One autumn evening, she was checking her mail at the clinic. Among the letters was a postcard with no return address. It showed a peaceful Midwestern wheat field. On the back, in firm, familiar handwriting, were 4 words, "May you find peace." Eleanor's heart stilled, then settled into a profound calm. He was finding his atonement, and he wished her peace. She placed the postcard in a book, closing the chapter on her past forever. She walked out of the clinic. Across the street, David was leaning against his car holding a bouquet of daisies, her favorite. He had waited patiently for a year, offering his quiet, steady warmth without ever pushing her. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile, and walked across the street toward him. The golden sunset, casting long, warm shadows on the pavement. The storm had passed, and her new life was finally blooming.